The following video is by the Dark Conservatarian. If you like it, be sure to subscribe to him, link in the description. And a reminder that patrons who donate at the Super VIP level or higher are entitled to have one video mirrored on my channel per month, no questions asked. Without further ado, here's the Dark Conservatarian.
So some of you may know that a couple months ago I did a live stream debate with Eron of Re-Education, an anarcho-communist on economics and capitalism. At one particular point, the issue of whether or not somebody has the right to own their private property in relation to the issue of the Native Americans and the colonizing of the Americas was brought up. And so I'm here to review that portion of the debate, not only to clear up what I was trying to say on that live stream, but to also argue the point for in the future of how business owners in modern America have legitimate claim over their private property, regardless of the past transgressions against the Indians. So people on the right and even some center leftists believe a business owner has a right to their property and thus nobody should seize that property because they didn't do anything wrong to anyone else in order to get that property. One of the rebuttals brought up is that no, they don't have rightful ownership because that land was originally stolen from the Native Americans many centuries ago. A similar response was given to me by Eron on how he believes they don't have the right to that private property.
That's a good point, but I noticed that when you're saying that, you have to make a lot of caveats, like as long as they purchase that that land in a ethical way, as long as they didn't steal it, as long as.
I probably didn't need to add in as long as much as I did in my statement on my principle, but I don't get why you're being so passive-aggressive right here, Eron. Of course, there's gonna be caveats to people's rights. Like, you have gun rights as long as you obtained that firearm through a legitimate transaction, or somebody gave you a firearm consensually, and as long as you don't use that gun on innocent people. Of course, people are gonna say you have rights over your stuff, as long as you don't use them to victimize people and their rights, and you didn't victimize other people and their rights in order to obtain said stuff.
But when we boil it down, right, when we look at how a lot of these people were able to gain a lot of land, they may have bought it from somebody else, who bought it from somebody else, who bought it from somebody else, who stole it from the people that lived here before, be it Native Americans or any number of Native peoples that were all across Europe.
This similar line of logic has been presented to me even before Eron as well.
It's like at some point the property was not yours though. What about the Native Americans and the people who were there, like right, if you go far back enough, who were essentially kicked off their land? So having private property, having land able to just be claimed by people and then like prized up, I think is silly.
And so what I said in response to Eron during our live stream was this clumsy bit of wording. The original people that were originally violated, in most cases anyways, they're like long dead, and to be trying to displace the present people of their resources or of their land or whatever, who are not even guilty of the original theft. The people who are guilty of the original theft are long dead as well. I find it to be a bit unjust to be displacing people nowadays of resources because of the people, the victims who are long dead are, you know, they got stolen from, and yet they're, I don't know. Sorry to all of my capitalist and pro-private property brethren that I struggled and perhaps even failed so badly live on stream to make this point. I'm slapping myself right now for it. Ow. The point I intended to articulate more succinctly was this. It is unethical to be displacing an innocent person's property or land because of the theft of it long ago by perpetrators long dead in the name of victims who are also long dead. By that same token, it's also nonsensical to say they don't have a right to that property because it was stolen or conquered land also because of the fact that both the perpetrators and the victims are long dead. I'm going to keep hammering this basic point as we engage further in on this segment of the debate.
The thing is that not only would I say that a lot of those people are still being oppressed today.
That is wholly irrelevant to the point I was making, Aaron. People modern day still have private property rights regardless of whatever persecution we want to pull up still happening modern day to Native Americans. Average Joe Schmo mom and pop shop owner is not responsible for what goes on the reservations, nor is he running a business on a piece of land that was stolen not by him from someone else who's still alive nowadays.
They also have to contend with the generational wealth disparity because they had their lands and resources all stolen from them to begin with. So they've never been able to get back on parity with the rest of the people that own those today.
Still not relevant to my point, nor is average Joe Schmo responsible for that.
If I was to steal your jacket and then sell it to another man, does that other man still, is he the proper owner of that jacket now because I stole it but sold it to him? Or is it still your jacket and it is stolen property?
Well, I think it would be a little bit of a different circumstance because I am still alive, though. And let me emphasize that if the original victim of theft was still alive today and the stolen object was sold off to somebody not responsible for said theft, then we can have a conversation of what is the proper action to take as far as getting that possession back to its original, still alive victim or compensating him. But that's entirely different from wanting to play the blame game with property owners for the actions of perpetrators long dead and likely unrelated to them.
But why would that have anything to do with it when the people that are still alive today are still suffering from a lot of the consequences from those actions? For example,
they're not alive. They're not alive. Their descendants are. I think I and Aaron ended up talking past each other at this very second. I was trying to continue on the point about how long past crimes do not incriminate current day unrelated innocent property owners. He was trying to go on a different subject about how Indians nowadays still end up persecuted on reservations and so forth.
No, I would say that they are absolutely still alive. For example, in Canada right now, the land was stolen from the Indigenous people, and right up until 19... Pardon?
What year?
It doesn't matter at what year it was still done, and then those people were.
It kind of does for my point, though. So regardless of if this was consciously intentional or not, I was still trying to bring this back to the specific subject of property stolen long ago and how modern day business owners are not responsible, thus do not have their private property rights invalidated, yet Aaron still wants to change the subject to talking about current day oppression.
A lot of the people that had their land stolen originally, right, their descendants are still alive and they have to suffer under apartheid.
I'm likely going to skip the rest of the parts when he just repeats the same point over and over about modern day oppression, because it's really not relevant to what I was trying to say this whole clip. I will say that nobody is in favor of oppressing natives current day, nor do we think it should have been done back then in the first place. But what we do believe is the damage has already been long done, the perpetrators are long dead, and average Joe Schmo is not the perpetrator. So why punish him for something he ultimately didn't do by taking his property? And the actual victim is also long dead, and the modern descendant of those victims aren't deserving of anything. Why? Simply because they weren't the victim of any land theft.
Yeah, well, in a lot of these cases, it's not stolen from their great-great-great-grandparents. It's stolen, right? And it still belongs to those people.
What people? Dead people?
Right? We're not talking about an individual that it was stolen from that owned the land. We're talking about people that collectively own the land as a people group.
I don't care if it was collectively owned or individually owned way back when. Modern business owners are still not responsible for the theft we're talking about.
Right? So saying that it just goes away, it's no longer theirs after a certain number of people died or after a certain amount of years, I would say is incorrect.
The point of why I say we shouldn't do anything in regards of land possession after so long is because there has to be a statute of limitations for when we can displace property owners. Otherwise, if there's no limitation, it opens the door for us to just tyrannically displace everybody in the world, not just out of their business property, but also out of their residential property too. Because you got to keep in mind, Aaron, it isn't just business owners owning land that was stolen 100+ years ago. Residents also owned land that was stolen 100+ years ago, which would make your and all commies' private versus personal property distinction worthless.
Another person coming in and saying, oh, well, I bought this fair and square. Well, no, they didn't buy it fair and square.
Yes, they did. The original conqueror stole the land not fair nor square, but the guy purchasing the land is exchanging fair and square. He himself wasn't doing anything wrong in order to obtain it.
And I would even go further as to say that capitalist businesses, before there was any government at all in Canada, owned Canada. The Hudson Bay Company was the de facto owner of the Canadian territories, right? And they were the ones that were doing a lot of these things to the Native Americans, doing dirty deals and signing contracts and stuff that they weren't going to fulfill. So yeah, it doesn't need to be a state to do this. This was directly done by a business.
I said absolutely nothing about the state throughout this segment, Aaron. I said nothing about them exclusively being the original thieves / conquerors. So it's irrelevant to my principle of how we should only hold the thieves responsible for land theft and not modern day business owners. And speaking of which, what about natives who stole from other natives, Aaron? Do natives nowadays have illegitimate claim over property? I don't mean to play whataboutisms. In fact, this isn't a whataboutism. This is to test and see how consistent leftist beliefs are on this subject. In fact, this argument goes out to everybody who argues the point of how property ownership and private property rights in the United States is invalid and illegitimate because stolen native land. Before white people ever came in colonizing, conquering, or just flat out stealing land from red people were doing it among themselves. If the appropriate action to do with all property in the United States is to confiscate it and give it all back to indigenous Americans and maybe even deport everybody who we determine is not Indian enough because they were really the original owners, well then the indigenous Americans that Europeans took the land from aren't even the original owners themselves. The land's out west, like in Wyoming. Should we give it to people of Comanche heritage, or should we give it back to the descendants of the Apaches who owned the land before the Comanches conquered them? And if somebody wanted to be an absolutist with this argument by going back further in history, they can argue that even the Apaches don't have a rightful or legitimate ownership or right over the lands in Wyoming. It's a big ol' mess to try and figure out who exactly we should give the land to. That is an impossible feat to achieve, in fact. I think communists and socialists realize this even too. Cause what is it they really want to do on this front? Do they truly, in all good faith, want to give all US land back to the natives as this argument would imply? Or is this all just some cheap ploy they don't really believe in themselves to try and guilt trip people who are even slightly pro-private property rights out of their pro-private property rights belief to justify giving all private property to the workers? Do they want to give all property within the US to the Reds or to the Reds? To add on to this, what if the Cherokees, the Cheyenne, the Lakota, the Comanches, the Apaches, the Iroquois, the Aztecs, the Incans, and all other America indigenous peoples were never conquered by the English, the Spanish, the Portuguese, the French, and so forth? Would you be totally A-okay with them running their privately owned businesses and lands however they damn well please without you so much as even regulating them, much less seizing private property and the means of productions from those evil bourgeois Native Americans? It's not like it's an impossibility that if left alone by the white man, that there would be nothing resembling a capitalist within Native America. As taking a look at modern day, you have Indian casino owners and entrepreneurs of other sorts, and just in general, some Native Americans who are sympathetic to capitalism themselves. Take Russell Means here, for example.
With regulation of bingo and gaming by the Congress, we are experiencing repetition of history. One shouldn't remedy success. The results? The United States government, through Congress, once again intervenes to regulate a proven success in violation of all basic and fundamental rules of economics and totally contrary to all the laws of capitalism. American Indians are human beings. We are supposed to be citizens of the United States of America.
This is not to say that a majority of Native Americans would be capitalists in a rhetorical situation of America never being colonized. In fact, I bet it's not even a majority of them who are capitalists nowadays in the real world. But it still goes to show as evidence at least that Native American capitalists, or something similar to that economic ideology, do exist here and now and would exist in a non-colonized America, and thus some of them at least would also privately own and run businesses big and small. So it makes me ask, commies, would you still proceed to seize the private property and means of production from that evil bourgeois Native American business tycoon because he was stealing, quote unquote, his employees' labor from them? If so, then bringing up the Native Americans as how their land was stolen from hundreds of years ago as a wedge for your crappy arguments on how nobody should own private property is absolutely moot, null, and void. And to add insult to injury,
I paraphrase the former Secretary of the Department of the Interior, James Watt. If you want to see an example of failed socialism, go to an Indian reservation.
Look, I'm going to just say this to anybody and everybody who may, in all good faith, truly believe that maybe we should give all the Americas back to natives like it was before Europeans came over. What all happened to the Indians, the indigenous peoples, the Native Americans, whatever term we want to call them, in order to conquer or steal their land was not right, to put it broadly and generally. And whatever happens nowadays on the reservations and elsewhere isn't moral either, and we should and could fix that. But at this point, on the point of past stolen land, it is far too late. There's nothing we could fix on this specific front that wouldn't be unethical and frankly evil itself. There's nothing we can do to punish or get payback from the actual perpetrators who originally did the stealing and genociding of Native Americans, because they're long dead. And punishing their possible descendants or anyone who just merely shares the same skin color as them by seizing the land they live or work on would be evil itself, because they themselves didn't do anything to deserve such a punishment. They damn well likely go looking back hindsight and think that, yeah, that was pretty screwed up. And there's nothing we can do to pay back to the victims of land theft or genocide either, because they're long dead too. And giving currently occupied land to their descendants doesn't make much sense to me either, because nothing happened to them personally, nor did they do anything to deserve it themselves. Not to mention that punishing innocent people for the sake of other people with, quite bluntly, an entitlement attitude is just going to likely perpetuate a never-ending cycle of one racial group wanting to get revenge at another racial group for what happened to their ancestors. So it has to stop somewhere. I'm not going to say blanketly do nothing, but whatever it is we do decide on doing, let's not punish people who did nothing wrong by seizing their property from them. Let's not do anything based off of looking back, but rather based off of looking forward. But whatever we do regardless, using the Native Americans as an argument to say private property rights are invalid is still a garbage argument. The Dark Conservatarian has been brought to you by patrons like you. I'd like to give a special thanks to Cat Chat, The Conundrum, and Mikhail the Stray Cat for all being such loyal followers and donating to me for my work. And if you'd like to donate to this channel and all my other content creation, link to my Patreon page is down below with some patron rewards. If you like this video, don't forget to hit that like button. And if you're new to this channel, don't forget to hit subscribe and set that bell notification button to all. Hope to see you all later, and God bless.